Hey guys, Tori Ann Perky here. From my homeschool to your homeschool, would you like to know the secret ingredient to making great writers out of your kids? I know, we all want to have really good writers because writing is such a great foundation for anything as they move forward. They're going to have to share their ideas, whether they're creative or they're prose or they're in an essay. Writing is one of the fundamental ways that kids learn how to communicate the older they get in their educational experience. And writing is also how we get the thoughts that are up here out. And that's so important. So how do you make them great writers? Well, the secret ingredient is something I actually stumbled upon. It wasn't something I read about in a book. It wasn't something that someone told me. It's something I just started to notice. And the reason that I noticed is because I was teaching teenagers how to write. And I started to see that there was a difference between the groups of teenagers. And I wanted to figure out what was the difference. So I started asking questions, started to figure out. And what I found out is that the kids who could write well had had lots of poetry growing up. And the kids who didn't hadn't had a lot of poetry. What? I thought poetry. Now, we had always done poetry in our house. We had read poetry every day. It was just like we'd read a daily poem. We didn't necessarily memorize it. We weren't necessarily copywriting with it. We were just reading good poetry. And what I started to realize is that when kids hear poetry over and over and over again, all kinds of poems, and they don't have to all be rhyming poems, but there's something about poetry that helps them develop a rich ability to hear how language rolls, to hear the cadence of language, to hear repetition and rhyme, and to understand how words can paint pictures, because poetry does that. Poetry is the artist's way of painting with pictures, because in order to create a poem, you have to pick just the perfect words and pull them together and condense them until you get the essence of how language works. Poetry is phenomenally difficult to write well, although it is so useful to read, and there's so much good poetry to read. So today I want to tell you about one of my favorite poetry resources. This is the first one we started reading together as a family. When we started reading together poetry, it was called the Random House Book of Poetry for Children. And this is an older edition. I had it spiral bound because it was falling apart, but the newer edition is still available on Amazon. 572 poems, one a day. You're going to be in this for a while. I just want to show you what happens when you listen to a poem. Now, this is a Sandburg poem. It's called Fog, and it's tiny. Think about it. You could read this in like 2 seconds. The fog comes on little cat feet. It sits looking over harbor and city on silent haunches and then moves on. In that little poem, we see the fog coming in silently on little cat feet, sitting, watching, and then moving away. And as a family, we would talk about the images we saw in our head, and we'd talk about the words, or we would just read the poem and move on. So I highly recommend that if you want to create great writers, mix in this secret ingredient that I'm sharing with you. Have a poem a day that you're reading, that you're loving as a family, regardless of where you're finding the poem. But I really like poem anthologies that are put together well, because they make it so easy to just open the book and read the next poem. No-brainer, which when I'm homeschooling my kids is exactly what I need. So if this is a book, this specific anthology is one that would be great for you to get started with, then check out the link up above or down below, wherever it is based on how you're watching this video. And I think you're going to really like it. All right, I'm Tori Ann Perky. From my homeschool to your homeschool, I make these videos every week so that you can be a super successful and confident homeschool mom.